I met you in Tulum, we had a very interesting conversation, and you actually told me about something, but you went to the core of it and explained to me about the binaries, the zeros and ones, but it was about the crystals, because I was asking you about the necklace that you're wearing, and then you told me everything, how you explained from like zeros and ones until how everything is reflected, in the not the stars, or like astrology, if you remember, and then coming back to earth, and then how everything is like from the ground, and then it bounces back with the energy. Do you remember something like that? Recall something like that?
I have hundreds and hundreds of these types of conversations, and we're talking about maybe holofractal theory, where in essence the whole universe is a hologram. We live in already the metaverse. Facebook is bringing out the metaverse and everything like that, but we're already living in it. Every single scripture that has ever been, says everything is an illusion. It says it in the Quran, it says it in the Vedas, it says it in Hinduism, in Buddhism. If you kind of understand that, it's like everybody now will be looking at us speaking on their device, probably an iPhone or some kind of Android. And the screen that they're looking at, there will be an image of you and I. Now, if you actually look deeper and closer, all it is lots of coloured dots. The image is actually an illusion. Our mind constructs the image of us speaking, but ultimately, all it is loads of dots. Now, if you look at what we are in reality, all we are loads of dots. We call them atoms. And each atom is like a pixel of the hologram. We really kind of live on what we'd call the holodeck. If you follow Star Wars and not Star Wars, the Star Trek and things like that. And everything in the quantum field, every single molecule that you're made of on a quantum level is disappearing and reappearing somewhere in the universe instantaneously all the time. We've got to question, who are we? What are we? Yeah, if every single bit of matter that constitutes you has been replaced by the time I've taken to describe and explain this, then, well, who are we? Even on a biological level, every single cell in our body is replaced every 7 years. Our spine is replaced every 3 years, our skin every 14 days, our liver every 3 months. So what are we? Who are we? So the kind of the link with the crystals that we were talking about before is the piezoelectric crystals. Now, every psychedelic that is out on the market, whether it's lysergic acid, dimethylide, whether it's DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
Sorry, Dave. Before going to the crystals, there's actually a super interesting topic we're talking about right now, that you're saying everything is a hologram. So how is this? You're saying this isn't the Quran. I believe anything in the Quran is something that's actually true.
Yeah.
And I am sure. How can you explain this in like your way about saying how we are a hologram here, like in this earth? Like, are we avatars? Are we in a dream?
Yes. Yeah, quite simply. So it was Max Planck, who's the godfather of quantum physics. He was quoted saying that consciousness is primary and fundamental. Everything in the universe comes from consciousness, not consciousness comes from the universe, which is kind of a misnomer that we have. We believe that consciousness is a product of the universe, but it's not. Yeah? In the Quran also, it says that there is a field of energy that permeates the entire universe and makes us one. There's a phenomenal amount of quantum physics in the Quran. And it's an informational field. So if you understand the collapse of the wave function, right, which is the particle-wave duality, yeah? So the particle-wave duality dictates that the question is light a particle or a wave? Yeah? Now, the Joule slit experiment, if you haven't heard of it, I would suggest people, YouTube it, and there's a really good cartoon there which explains it. But the long short of it is what they wanted to do is do an experiment to find out if light was a particle or a wave. And they shot light through a slit to see what kind of pattern it made. Did it make a wave pattern or a particle pattern? And in the experiment, they had conflicting results. And what they found is when we observe the behavior of light, light changes its behavior as if it knows it's being watched. And we call this the collapse of the wave function. So the collapse of the wave function dictates that when you observe light, immediately it changes its behavior from a wave of probability into a particle of reality. Now you could look at the way we render reality in the holofractal or in a gaming theory. So you play a game, something like Grand Theft Auto, yeah? And the images on the screen, it only renders on the screen what you can see. It doesn't render behind you until you turn round. Yeah? Because there's no point. If you're not looking at it, it doesn't need to exist. And this is the premise with quantum physics and the collapse of the wave function. Technically, underneath your chair, if nobody can see it, it doesn't exist until you look at it, because that's at the point you collapse the wave function and you create it. You create it through expectation. Yeah? So the reality renders itself in the same way. And all these premises are written in many, many, many scriptures. So this is the holofractal, like everything's a hologram. Everything is contained in the single point. Yeah? The as above, so below. Every atom is like a portal to the infinite. If that makes sense.
Yes. So I want to ask you, Adrian, how come there's a lot of different colors of crystals? For example, the pink, the blue, the maroon, and each one resembles something like, one that protects you from the evil eye, and one of them is like, it gives you abundance.
Well, you've got to understand what crystals actually are. They're technically not a solid, liquid, or a gas. They're a fourth state. They're a vibrational state. It's what we call a standing wave. A crystal is a frequency of vibration. Nikola Tesla, actually was stated saying all crystals are conscious. They're little pockets of consciousness. Now, if you maybe remember, we used to have these quartz radios, yeah? And a quartz radio used a piece of quartz. And the way it used it is what we call piezoelectric. Piezoelectric means when you squeeze it, when you put it under pressure, it changes the frequency, yeah? So in a radio, there was a piece of quartz, and if they wanted to change the frequency of the radio to go from 106.8, which is, Starlight FM, up to, Saudi FM at 109.3, whatever it is, I'm just making these up, obviously. It just squeezes the crystal until it becomes that frequency, and then that becomes a receiver. So crystals are actually transmitters and receivers. Yeah? And the stream of information that you receive in the radio, it depends on the frequency that it's set at. So all crystals are just different frequencies of vibration. And colour is, in essence, an illusion. All colour is just a different bandwidth of frequency. You've got a black shirt on. Now, that black shirt, it doesn't emit the colour black. What it does is it absorbs all of the color spectrum, so therefore appears black. Yeah? The guy behind you's got a yellow shirt on, which means it absorbs every other color frequency apart from the spectrum, the frequency band of yellow, right? So light goes into his shirt and then it radiates out a certain frequency, which our eyes translate into the color yellow. We've only been kind of conditioned to believe these colors, yeah? And we've labeled them, right? But ultimately there is no color. There is just frequency bands of electromagnetic radiation. Yeah? So crystals are quite simply different frequencies. Now, if you go out into the sun, right, your body will produce vitamin D. It's a byproduct of that electromagnetic frequency interacting with your cellular matrix, and it produces vitamin D. Neural peptides are actually frequencies of vibration. They're actually, in essence, crystals. They're standing waves, right? Everything that we're made of is made of crystals, and all of these crystals come from the sun. Yeah? We use radio spectroscopy to actually tell what the sun's constituted of, because we know the bands of frequencies and which elements are what frequencies. Yeah? It's just applied, physics. And these crystals, if they're the same frequency, technically they're quantumly connected. So they could transfer information. So your body, that's right, so they give off in essence a radiation. Now if you go and actually get too close to the incorrect crystal, say uranium, then the energy that it's emitting is a frequency that destroys the cellular structure. Just like if you had an earthquake and the frequency of the earthquake was the same resonance of a building, right? In essence, that building would start to store energy until it meets its mechanical limit. Yeah? And that's when the building falls down. Yeah? The way to best look at it, the analogy is like everybody's played with a kid on a swing. Yeah? And you push the swing, and there's a certain cadence, there's a certain rhythm that you have to push this swing in. Yeah? If you get the rhythm right, the swing stores energy. In other words, it goes higher and higher and higher. Now, if you attempt to push the swing too early, it hits you in the face. Yeah? And you absorb all that energy, right? And the swing swings less. Now, if you do it too late, you're chasing the swing. Yeah? So you're off resonance. You're putting lots of energy in, but the swing isn't able to store. It's what we call a resonant entity, right? So if you've ever played around with speakers, you'll find that a certain frequency vibrates the window. Yeah? It vibrates your drink. It vibrates your stomach or your eyes or whatever. Everything has a certain resonant frequency. And at the resonant frequency, it will start to transfer energy. And it's that transfer of energy which is the power. So your body is in essence a cymatic pattern. Cymatics is how frequency creates structure. Yeah? So your body is in essence lots of different resonance. In medical procedures now, we actually are able to put what we call pseudo vitamins and minerals into the body with frequencies of vibration, right? Sound healing has been around for thousands of years, and now we are using it in medical, med beds and things like that. We use light therapy, we use sound therapy. It's an energy transfer. And what we're doing is we're looking for the harmonic structure of you and looking at that harmonic structure and looking for positive interactions and destructive interactions. And we find certain harmonic resonances which are in dis-ease in the system. And just like your noise-cancelling headphones, which can get rid of background noise, if you've got noise in your system, we can use frequencies which are out of phase to cancel them out and cancel the dis-ease in your system. Yeah? So crystals quite simply just work the same way. Crystals give off a frequency of vibration in an electromagnetic format. We can measure it. Yeah, this is not woo-woo. This is just applied science. And those crystals, if the frequency is in congruence with frequencies that you need in your body, and it meets that resonance, that your body will start to store that energy. It's pretty simple.
So everything in life is about energies and atoms.
I mean, it was Einstein and Nikola Tesla that said if you want to understand the universe, think along the lines of frequency, vibration, and wavelength. It's as simple as that. Everything, I mean, it's in the Hermetic principles. Everything vibrates.
That's true. So if someone wants to like manifest their, their dreams, like, some people have, or let's say, I want to have a castle by the beach with a yacht, at the front. But that's like how when people want to have a dream and manifest it. How come like now we use the modern language, I want to manifest this, I want to manifest it.
Yeah.
How do you attract that energy?
So, in the Quran, it says we must thank Allah as if we already have it. Yeah? Which is I said in the Quran, it says we must thank Allah as if we already have it. Yeah? So this is what we call the attitude of gratitude. And there's several mechanisms at play. There's one which is a more ethereal kind of spiritual, magical, which is, in essence, again in the Quran it says we're all connected, we're all one. Now, if we are all one, and we're all connected on a deep subconscious spiritual level, what we're doing is we're collaborating in the ethereal realm. So you attract to you people or things which match your vibration. Yeah? And it is what your embodied belief is. We don't get what we want out of life, we get what we expect. It's expectation that drives this force, this power, this energy. Yeah? If we're just looking at simple psychology, we have a thing in our brains called the reticular activating system, the RTA, right? And it's the base of the amygdala, the stem of the brain. And it's a bit like a Google search engine. If you put in Google, I don't want stress, you'll get 333 million pages on stress. It doesn't see the I don't want. Yeah? It works on confirmation bias, right? It wants to find evidence of what you're believing. Yeah? Now, just like in Google, it's able to filter vast amounts of information. So, your eyes, for example. I'm currently speaking to a camera, and my iPhone has got a 12 megapixel camera on it. Yeah? The new 14's got a 48 megapixel camera on it. Well, your eyes, the ocular cavity, are 475 megapixel cameras, taking up to 60 frames per second, which means that the amount of information your eyes are taking in is around about 65 gigabytes of data per second when you're in an optimal state. Yeah? When I say optimal state, these are flow states. Usually if you're in a car accident or you're racing cars, everything seems to slow down. It's because the cyclical rate of your eyes increase from 24 hertz to about 60 hertz. Yeah? Now, your ears take on, hundreds of megabytes of data per second as well. Your nervous system's a few hundred megabytes of data per second. And your mind has got to process all this information. Now, the conscious mind, the bit I'm speaking to right now, can only process information at about 40 bits per second. 40, that's it. Yeah, it's tiny. Not 40 megabytes, 40 bits. Yeah? So
what's like, pretend Adrian, like, I don't understand these things, like the bits, the zeros and ones. Can you please explain this for others to know what's the bits and...
Well, yeah, I mean, our brain operates just like a computer on zeros and ones. That's how it processes reality. It takes an analog signal, which is a wave, right? And then turns it into a digital signal, which is what the brain processes. And it bounces, just like in a processor, these bits of information around your synapses. And depending on the pattern of firing, that denotes, what we experience. If I say the word pattern, the same neurons fire every time I say it. This is, in essence, what we can use with electroencephalographs. We can extract information from the brain now, because all we do is look for those patterns of firing. Yeah? We had 20, 30 years ago monkeys with these electroencephalographs on their head doing basic remote control functions. So if they thought they are hungry, it would deliver food. Yeah? If they thought they wanted to turn the light off, the light would turn off. And now we're getting all sorts of technologies out which we can do this in. Yeah? So this is just simply how we process it, like a computer, right? So your reticular activating system, it can process information around about 40 million bits per second, right? It's 1 million times faster. And this subconscious is, in essence, what controls your reality, right? And it's your conditioned expectation which controls how you perceive reality. It's like an augmented reality. Augmented reality is becoming more and more kind of, understood these days. We're getting these Google glasses, and we've actually now got contact lenses that you can put in, and you could go around a city and you could look at a building and it'll flash up the information of the building. In fact, there's I don't know if you've seen some of these, what's that series on Netflix, where it's all kind of like the dark images of the future. Oh, what's it called? It'll come to me in a minute. And Black Mirror. Yeah. And there's one where you can literally, everything in your life is recorded through your retina, and you can rewind it and replay it and things like that. Yeah. So the way we process this information in the subconscious, it's like an augmented reality. If somebody's scared of spiders and they sit down and there's a bit of black fluff there, they'll jump thinking it's a spider, because their mind will imprint over that an expectation. It's a fear, right? Our amygdala is the primitive part of our brain, right? It's the kind of animalistic, the lizard part of our brain, and all its job is to protect us and save our lives. Yeah? So what it will do is it will use these primitive expectations to look for danger, right? And this is the challenge. 95% of how we experience life is an augmented reality based on our conditioned expectations. Yeah? And this is overlaid. This is how we can easily be fooled. This is what magicians play with and things like that. It's like, if we're taking on 65 gigabytes of data per second through the eyes, and we can only consciously process 40 bits per second, then 99% of what we see, our brain makes up in an expectation algorithm. Yeah? So we predict what's going to happen and overlay that over us. But often it's not actually true. Yeah? And it's like when you meet somebody, you might take an instant dislike for them for some reason. You don't understand why. And all it is that they might have mannerisms that remind you of a person that used to bully you when you were at school. You don't remember that experience. It's not there's what we call implicit memory and explicit memory. And implicit memory is an emotional memory where you don't get the kind of the recording. You don't get the physical access to, oh yeah, I remember when I was in 4th grade and this guy did this and whatever. It's just, I don't feel comfortable and I don't know why. So that's what usually is what we call an implicit memory. And it's like that augmented reality. What your mind's doing is saying, this is reminiscent of a bad situation, so I'm going to make you feel uneasy, so you get out of here, right? And then you're safe.
Is that why they say, like, sometimes, like, trust your gut feelings, or is that where the gut feelings comes from? Or has nothing to do with it?
Well, this is one of the challenges. In self-development and in spirituality and a lot of kind of spiritual teachings and everything like that, it talks about finding stillness, finding peace, yeah? Ego and fear is noisy, yeah? And it's not necessarily our intuition. We've got a deep inner knowing. We call it claircognizance, this knowing without knowing how you know, right? And this is being connected to the field, yeah, the field of information, right? This is something that's been observed in ancient, kind of Indian tradition. They call it the Akashic record. Some people call it the quantum field. Some people call it source, and this is again a phenomenon mentioned in the Quran as well, yeah? And this field of information we can tap into. There's, I can talk about all sorts of stuff. I do a thing called remote viewing, yeah, and I know some of the best scientists in the world that research this. And some people have the ability to see things live somewhere else on the planet, yeah, that's actually happening and describe it in real time, yeah? And how do they know these things? They can't possibly know these things. Yeah, it's beyond...
What's the science behind that? Is it like fear and evil? Are these the two things that every mankind have?
Well, we all have this kind of mechanism. So fear and ego is in essence just the conditioned mind, right? It is identity, right? Identity is ego. So me, I'm white, I'm English, I'm, bald, I am 50 years old, I have a certain education, yeah, somebody's Christian, they're Muslim, they're Hindu. These are all identities, yeah? And it is when we get trapped up in this identity, ego wants to defend it. If you're different than me and have different beliefs, then that means you must be against me. This is all ego. Yeah, and this is the thing that causes conflict in the world and conflicts in relationships and everything like that. It's identity. It's having a perception of who you are. But when we get rid of all this and we lose our identity, which is in essence, part of Buddhism. Buddhism's not a religion. It's just a way of being. It's a philosophy. Yeah? And when we find stillness, it's about letting go of all attachments, of all beliefs. Everything just is. There is no good, there is no bad, everything just is. And when we can reach that level of stillness and peace, then we can hear the whispers of our intuition, yeah? This claircognizance. But usually these fears, this is the augmented reality. This is our expectations, right? We've had a wound in the past where somebody's mistreated us. So when we see evidence of something similar to that, we will project that over this experience because we want to avoid that pain. Yeah? So that's the difference between intuition, which you can only truly tap into when you're in a place of stillness and peace, and this is what meditation and mindfulness is all about, yeah? And if you are in fear, if you're in anxiety, if you're triggered, if you're angry or you're frustrated, all of that you are observing yourself technically unconscious, yeah? And that's just an augmented reality, a projection of your past conditioning and experience.
Can predict the future and they're right about it.
I've done it actually many times. I've been experimenting with this for quite some time.
I know you have.
So again, we've got this, if in the holofractal theory, yeah, time is an illusion, yeah? In the multiverse theory, every single possible reality is coexisting all at once, right? I don't know if you've heard of the infinite monkey theorem, yeah? So the infinite monkey theorem dictates that if you had an infinite number of monkeys randomly hitting a keyboard, one of them would write the works of Shakespeare. Yeah? Because you've got an infinite number. Actually, if you expound that theory, technically, you would have every combination that is entirely possible of letters being typed instantaneously an infinite number of times. So every single piece of knowledge that could ever be conceptualized technically would be written an infinite number of times. Yeah? People really can't get their heads around infinity, right? Yeah? So if there is an infinite number of realities, right? Like, what do you call it? What do you call it's been doing it? I watched the films with Thor and, Iron Man and all that, the Marvel Universe, right? We've had some films recently in them where they go through portals to alternate dimensions, where the other version of themselves are living a life which is slightly different. Yeah? Now, you're talking about the manifestation before, right? So technically, there is a version of you that is living every single possible iteration, an infinite number of iterations. In some, you're the speaker on the other side and I'm the one listening there, right? In one of them, you're a female. In another one, you're gay. Yeah, in another one, you're 4 foot tall. The other one, you're a 6'8" giant, There's every single possible iteration, right? Now, there's some people that believe that every time you go to sleep, you go into a portal, and dreams are in essence you experiencing your life in the other dimension, in this alternate dimension.
How does that happen? It's crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? But the way to look at it is like you turn on your TV, you've got, especially if you've got, satellite and everything like that, you've got 1,000 channels, right? And you press a button and the same screen displays a different reality. It just flicks to a different frequency. So if you look, light, in essence, everything this reality around us is technically 10 to the minus 27 nothing. Yeah? It's made of fuck all, right? If we look at what we're made of, at a quantum level, there is more space in between the elemental particles, the quantum particles that make us up, than the space in between the celestial bodies in our universe, right? And there's 93 million miles between the Earth and the Sun, and there's only 2 lumps of dirt, Mercury and Venus, in between us. And to give you an idea of scale, if we drilled a hole straight through the Earth and shined a torch down it, it would take 0.042 of a second, 0.042 of a second for that light to get from here to the other side of the planet. And it takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for the light to get from the sun to us here. That's how huge the distance is. And when we look at the quantum level, there are thousands of times more the aspect ratio of distance between them, which means you are made of nothing but vibrating energy. Yeah? And that vibrating energy is only there because you have an awareness of it. You collapse the wave function. This is the avatar. Yeah? You create this in the Matrix when Neo gets plugged back in, yeah, with Morpheus, and they go into the construct program. It kind of goes, oh, all my bits have gone, yeah, all these plug-in bits. And he says, yeah, this is your residual self-image. This is how you perceive and want to present yourself in reality. So right now, this is your avatar. You've created this avatar throughout your life. Now, we can change this avatar when we like. In fact, the world's a stage. We are actors. We could dress up in a different way, get a different haircut, get even facial reconstruction and be somebody completely different if we wanted to be. Yeah? But it takes physical effort. Now, there's some very interesting kind of stories there was one particular, right, and this is a very well documented and very well viewed event from the, I think it was in the Second World War. It was in one of the wars, I can't remember, it's irrelevant. And what it was, is there was a healer, yeah, and the healer was supposed to have these magical powers. You know, Jesus, you know, was proposed to be one of these types. And what it was is there was a guy who came off the battlefield and he had his kneecap completely blown off. And there was hundreds of witnesses that independently viewed this and witnessed it. And this healer put his hand over his knee, and everybody says that light glowed from under his hand, and then when he removed his hand, he had a knee and he could stand up and walk. Yeah? There's been all sorts of witnessing of phenomena like this. There is actually on YouTube, you can actually go and watch it. Greg Braden, who's quite a famous researcher, was researching this. There's a medicineless hospital in Beijing, and they use healers. And there's a video where there's a person with cancer, which has got a cancer about the size of a tennis ball inside their, you know, abdomen. And they're using a one of those scanners that you use for scanning pregnant people. And these 5 or 6 healers are gathered around the bed. And they all use a word, in essence, which means already healed. Yeah? In essence, it's the same premise of what I mentioned earlier about what it says in the Quran. We must thank Allah as if we already have it. Yeah? You visualize as if it's already done. And this word, in essence, means already healed. And they're chanting this word, and within about 3-4 minutes, you watch this cancer reduce, and disappear completely. Yeah? Now, my project, called the Ashtar Project, that, you know, I mentioned, we were talking about, you know, before this call. This is kind of loosely based. I'll go on. Sure.
People who would want to later join this your project or like be a member. You never know. Like explain what is it exactly from like 101 0 like.
Okay. So
pretend I don't know anything.
So what I want to do is I want to explore all these phenomena that I'm talking about in a very scientific and very deductive way. So the Ashtar Project, Ashtar is Sanskrit for 8, A-S-H-T-A, the Ashtar Project. And Ashtar is Sanskrit for number 8. Now it's kind of loosely based on a book by a woman called Lynn Taggart. She wrote a book called The Power of 8. And what she did is she got 8 random people together and set focused intention. So let's say one of the members has had a bad neck for years. And what they did is they got all of the members in the group to focus on that person having a healthy neck. Again, thank it as if it already is real. Yeah? And they've documented all sorts of really magical and amazing healing. They've even done it on large scale. They've had like weather systems, like a hurricane that's been heading towards a city. And they've got thousands of people live to visualize the hurricane turning right. And it turned right. Now, whether they did it or not, I don't know, but it's kind of an interesting correlation. It's what we call the Maharishi effect. So I don't know if you've heard of the Maharishi effect, but what it was is in India, hundreds of years ago, all of India was under civil war. There was hundreds of wars and battles happening everywhere throughout the whole of India. So the Maharishi got 3,000 of the spiritual leaders from all over India together at his pad. And in essence, they meditated and visualized peace in India. That weekend, all of the wars stopped. Yeah? Wow. Now, actually a group attempted to replicate this, and they went to the chief of police in New York. And they asked the chief of police, What would it take to halve the crime in New York in one day? And the chief of police went, about a metre of snow. There was a metre of snow, nobody'd be going anywhere. That would halve the crime rate in New York in one day. Yeah? So what they did is they got 3,000 practiced Buddhists to visualize peace in New York. And they halved the crime rate. Interesting correlation. Yeah? So what I want to do is I want to take this experiment to the next level. And what I want to do is I want to put 8 matched people. So I'm going to use gene keys, astrology, human design. Yeah, I'm going to use a peer-to-peer model. So if you're an entrepreneur who's exited, from Silicon Valley and is a multimillionaire, you'd be in a group of 8 with people that are like-minded, which have diverse skill sets. Yeah. If you are an executive, you'd be in like-minded, so on and so forth. Right. And what we would do is we would create these groups of 8. Right? And the theory behind it is that instead of putting random people together, if we put very carefully selected people together, maybe we can use this harmonic resonance, this coherence, to amplify the phenomenon. So what we will do is, let's say you're in a group of 8 and you're wanting to launch a business, and what you need is a new CEO to help push the business. That's what you want to manifest. So what we would do is, in the meeting, we would log on the app that you want to manifest a CEO. We would then go through some protocols. It might be visualization. It might be a chant. It might be a magical ceremony, right? There's all sorts of things in ancient, that are steeped in mysticism. So we will use some of these processes, and we will give you a specific one. Now, you will decide whether we do it daily or weekly or monthly or whatever it is. Now, you follow that procedure until you manifest your CEO. And what we will do is we will get 100 groups of 8 using the same modality. Now, let's, for example, say on average, the groups that are using this specific modality manifest what they're looking for in 2 weeks. On average, just to pluck a figure out of the air. Now, we'll have another 100 groups that are using a completely different modality. Now, let's say those groups on average are manifesting in 4 weeks. Now, what we'll do is, when the next member wants to manifest something, we will swap modalities. The ones that we're doing in 4 weeks, we will give you that modality, and your one that you're doing in 2 weeks, we'll give it to the other ones. And do your groups suddenly go to 4 weeks and the other groups suddenly go to 2 weeks? Yeah? In that way, can we objectively measure whether it's the modality that has an effect, or is it the people that have an effect? Yeah? So this is what I mean by creating, double-blind experiments where we will know exactly what modalities and what groups are using what. And if we create hundreds of these groups and give them specific processes, we can then determine whether a particular process has a quicker or more efficient effect than others. Now, we're going to explore crystals, right? So again, crystals, there's all sorts of woo-woo and theory about what crystals can do, whether they can heal, yeah, or whether they can connect us psychically, yeah. Crystal skulls, right, a skull carved from a crystal, have been steeped in mysticism for thousands of years. Their premise, their kind of phenomena, they're supposed to tap into higher consciousness, right? They're supposed to be like metaphysical telephones. There's 8 these mystical Mexican skulls. They've been around for a long time. So the idea is we're going to make crystal skulls and we'll give them to the group and we'll use them in meditation and things like that. And the theory is to try and make a hemisync. In other words, there's a series on Netflix called Sense 8. And it's about these 8 people that are psychically connected and able to tap into each other's skills and knowledge, yeah, at will. Now, what I want to do is create an experiment to see if we can match people together and do that. Now, I did a little experiment with a very good friend of mine. We were very similar. He did, a similar sort of remote viewing to me. And what he would do, what the experiment we did, is when he was in a meeting and he kind of got a little bit stuck, he would go into his mind, he'd close his mind, he would kind of go into a meditative state, and he would ask me a question in his head. He'd go, Adrian, if you were in this situation, what question would you ask? And he would actually hear my voice say a question, something that he wouldn't have thought of, right? And it was like, genie, it was like, oh my God, yeah, I never thought of that. And then he'd ask the question, it'd be great. And then he would ring me up later and he'd say, if you were in this situation, right, and I asked you this question, what would you say? And 99% of the time, it was verbatim what he heard in his mind. Yeah? And it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. So what we want to do is see if we can replicate this in a group of 8, right? So maybe you're in a board of directors, and you're in a meeting and it's something important and you're feeling a little stuck. Maybe you could ask your group of 8 for inspiration without them being there, without them being on the phone.
Adrian, that's crazy.
It is. It's absolutely crazy. But what if it is real? And this is the question, what if? And can we create an experiment? So that's what the Astro Project is about.
So you're saying this is like science?
Oh shit, yeah. No problem. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, this is measurable, quantifiable. I can talk about many experiments which have actually demonstrated this. This phenomenon has been documented throughout history. There's things like, for example, Darwin observed some of this phenomenon. There was 2 islands which are very unique in the middle of the Atlantic, right? And there used to be a land bridge between them many years ago when the seas were lower, right? And there's a very specific species of monkey that only resides on these islands, right? But now, because the sea's rising, they're separated by about 18 miles of sea. So the monkeys cannot kind of navigate between them. Now what they did is they trained one set of monkeys on one island, right, to use a stick as a tool to get ants out of an anthill, right? Within a month, the monkeys on the other island were doing the same and they'd never been shown it. Yeah? So there's another experiment. It was, what they wanted to do is find out if information, knowledge, is passed on through our DNA or there is some other mechanism. So what they did is they constructed a complex maze, and the maze had various exits, and the exits had, different colours, and one of them had food. And they put a rat of a certain species in the centre of the maze and timed how long it took to find the food. Now, I'm gonna kind of just make the figures up, and but the premise is the same. So let's say, for example, it took 2 hours for the rat to figure out where the food is in the maze. Now, what they did is they put the rat in 1,000 times to see if it could learn it, and over a period of time, the rat learned that going this way was the wrong way, and it took it down to like 1 hour and 3/4. It avoided certain parts of the maze. So what they did then is they took that rat out, it had offspring, they grew the offspring up to the age the rat was when it was doing that, and then they put the offspring in the maze. The theory is that if there was some kind of memory that they had been passed on through their lineage, they would also have that pre-knowledge and start at a similar time as the previous rat. Lo and behold, it did. It avoided the parts of the maze that the rat had learned. They were like, oh, that's interesting. So they put the rat in 1,000 times to see if it would learn it even better. And it did. It took it from 1 hour and 3/4 down to 1 hour and a half. So now what they did is they got a rat from the same species, but from prior in the bloodline to it. So it can't be DNA related. It isn't in the same family bloodline. It's from previous. It's like, going to your great-great-great-granddad and having one of your cousins going off, on that family tree. Yeah? There is no blood direct, it's not one of your offspring. Yeah? So it can't be from you passing it on through DNA. Yeah? And they put that rat in. And so the one before it took it from an hour and 3/4 down to an hour and a half. So the idea is if there was no memory, if it was through DNA, that rat would start at 2 hours. Yeah, it wouldn't have any precognitive understanding of the maze. But it didn't. It started at an hour and a half, where the last one left off. And it's like, whoa, it can't be DNA. So they put that in over and over again, and it took it down from an hour and a half to an hour and a quarter. And what they did is they published their results. Now, two different universities in a different country decided to replicate the experiment. And they built the same maze identically. They got the same species of rat from their country. So completely disconnected in every single way possible. And they put that rat in, and it started where the last one left off. Yeah? So there's a book by a scientist called Rupert Sheldrake called Morphic Resonance, right? So the theory is that it is something in the field of information that passes information. In fact, we've found that DNA is actually quantumly entangled, right? And something that's quantumly entangled can actually share information through what we now kind of lovingly call the internet, not the internet. This is kind of what I mentioned on my little kind of intro video before, yeah? So this internet is this field of energy that permeates the entire universe and makes it one. Again, it says that in the Quran, it says that in the Vedas, it says that in Hinduism and Buddhism and all of the scriptures, yeah? And this is where the information's held. It's not through DNA, it's not passed that way. There is some kind of energetic connection, which is instantaneous. Right? And this phenomenon is actually experienced in all sorts of other ways. When we're trying to synthesize new crystals, yeah, it's very challenging. It's a certain resonance that they've got to, a certain harmonic resonance they've got to hit to make that crystal crystallize. Now, there might be 10 labs around the world trying to be the first to synthesize this new crystal. They do it in the pharmaceutical industry, yeah? And what they've found is that the moment one of these labs synthesize the crystal, instantaneously around the world, all the rest suddenly be able to do it as well. Yeah? It's like they're all connected and they're all sharing information. So if that's the case, DNA is actually quantumly entangled. These are scientific explanations for this kind of ethereal perspective that we're all connected, we're all one, right? There's an informational field that is the internet which connects everything. And we're sharing this on a subconscious level. Because our conscious minds are just not even anywhere near powerful enough to even conceptualize this, never mind tap into it on a conscious basis. Yeah, what we have to do is set intention and then see what actually comes up.
Yes, please. Hello. This is Walid, Adrian.
How you doing, brother? I can't hear you. You've gone quiet.
Fine. How about now?
That's a little bit better. Still a bit quiet.
How about now? Do you hear me?
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier the information field, and there's something in our Islam called Lawh al-Mahfuz, which is, to me, it's similar. So in that Lawh al-Mahfuz, everything gonna happen is written there. Anything that might happen is written there. Everything that could happen, whatever, is
there is me in certain ways, certain, as you said, dimensions. It's all written in that Lawh al-Mahfuz. And as you mentioned, all this information field or Lawh al-Mahfuz, if we get into that information, if we get into that, we can see and change who we are and change our dimensions.
Exactly.
In that sense. Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to mention one thing. There is this guy, he's Russian. His name is Vadim, if you heard it. He has this theory of transurfing.
Oh, yes.
And it's a huge book. It's called Transurfing. And he was talking about a lab, as you said, one of the experiments. I just like to share this with you guys. There's a lab in Ukraine where they take kids, small kids, and they train them how to see that information field, because according to him, kids are more pure.
Absolutely.
Can get to that field easier than us, because we don't use our heart, we are blocking ourselves because the way we are raised and all of that. The fascinating thing is those kids, they can see beyond the walls. They have learned how to, and imagine there is a wall, and then they can see beyond and they can tell exactly what's happening beyond that. I'm not sure if that's true or not, because I read it in the book. I kind of feel it's true. I'm following the transurfing thing, and now you're saying all this experiment that a lot of people have been doing about the monkeys and the rat. I just wanted to say, yeah.
So let me.
I'm in that project.
So let me share an interesting. So one of my good friends is a guy called Stefan Schwartz, and he's researched remote viewing for over 50 years. He's done 23,000 experiments, all rigorously, kind of double blind and everything like that. Now, one of them was called the Alexandra Project. Yeah? And what he did is, it was done 35, 40 years ago. And he approached the Alexandra University in Egypt. Yeah? And he approached them and he said, look, what I want to do is, I've got these people that have got these special skills. They can see things, which exist, but we can't see them, right? And what I want to do is, I want to use these to find ancient monuments that anecdotally we have this history of knowing about, but we haven't got any archaeological evidence. Now, being in a university 40 years ago, they went, you want to do what? They looked at him strange and they went, you're not going anywhere near Egypt. It says, but we'll give you a chance. We've got 10,000 square kilometers of desert we've been archaeologically, researching, investigating for the last nearly 2 years, and we haven't found anything. If you can help us find something there, you will get our attention. If you really want to get our attention, we would like it to be Byzantine of origin, Christian in origin, because we've got nothing in that whole region. That would be groundbreaking. And, we'd like a mosaic floor. So he went, okay. So he went back to America, got his two best remote viewers, this man and a woman. They marked a place on a map. They flew back to Egypt. They were met by the people from the university, some videographers and some scribes, and they were driven 4 hours into the desert to the place they'd marked on the map. Now, these remote viewers said where the place was. They put 4 stakes on the ground to denote the corners of the building. They said how many rooms there would be, how deep the ruins would be, what artifacts would be found, how big those artifacts were, and which room had the mosaic floor. Now, they went over there with the current technology of the time, and they said there's nothing there. Yeah, they had pretty basic technology back then. Yeah? When they excavated, they were 18 inches off corner of the building. They were 1 centimetre off the depth. They got the number of rooms correct. They got the artifacts correct. They measured the artifacts to 5/8 of an inch. And they got the mosaic floor. On the basis of that, they went, oh my God, yeah, okay, you have our attention. So they allowed them to go into Egypt. Now, there's a video of a woman, and they're in this 4x4, and they're driving around Egypt, right? And she's going, left, right, and then she says, stop, and she jumps out of the car, and she points to this building, she says, it's under there. And she's talking about Alexandra's palace, yeah? Now she's pointing to this thousands of year old ancient building, right? And she says it's underneath the foundations of that building. It took 3 months to get planning permission to drill this ancient building, right? They drilled the building and they found Alexandra's palace, exactly how they'd drawn it, right? Hidden away for thousands of years. They also marked in a place of a map. They says, if you go here and you dive, it's under 100 meters of water, you will find the lost lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They went, they dived, they found it. They went on to find Cleopatra's Needle and various other ancient things that, again, we had stories about, but no evidence of. And this was something that was done 40 years ago. Yeah? So this is what we call non-local consciousness. A big misnomer, a big misunderstanding about consciousness is that consciousness is inside of us. Our soul or the energy, our life force is inside us. And it's not, right? All the scientific experiments have shown that it's not, right? My favorite analogy is the film The Avatar, right? So if you've seen Avatar, the soldier in the film gets into a pod and his consciousness is streamed live like a remote control into the alien. Yeah? Now for him, he is the alien. I can walk, I can breathe, I'm existing as this alien. I'm this blue alien. Yeah? Now, but it's not inside the alien. He hasn't kind of been implanted in it. They're just streaming it in like a remote control. Yeah? So if you use that analogy, that premise of here, right, like this body is like a radio set, yeah, a TV, right? You tune into the frequency and you get this stream of consciousness. Our perception is that we are human, but we're not. That is the illusion. Yeah? So what we can do is we can take this consciousness and place it somewhere else on the planet. Yeah? Because everything's connected. This is the field of information. As we say, all knowledge is contained and we can tap at will into this knowledge if we have got the skills to do so. Yeah? And this is what we call non-local consciousness. And as I say, this is a phenomenon that has been proven scientifically over and over again. He did an experiment to find out if consciousness was electromagnetic in form. So what he did is he got his remote viewers and he put them in Faraday cages. Yeah? Now a Faraday cage is a screened cage that screens out electromagnetic radiation, right? It doesn't allow radio signals to penetrate. Now everything in our reality is electromagnetic in form, right? So he put them in various Faraday cages until he'd screened all radio frequencies, all electromagnetic frequencies, apart from ultra-low frequency. The only way you can screen ultra-low frequency is by going 0.5 kilometer underwater. So he approached the US Navy and he said, what I want to do is I want to put one of my remote viewers in one of your nuclear submarines, go 0.5 kilometer underwater and see if they can remote view with the same level of accuracy as they can on the surface. Now, they turned around and went, actually, this is kind of interesting because when our nuclear submarines go below 0.5 kilometer underwater, we lose all radio contact because all electromagnetic radiation is screened. Yeah? They go dark, in essence. And if we can find a way of communicating with them beyond this radio, it would be very interesting. So they said yes. Yeah? And they put one of the remote viewers and they went down 0.5 kilometer underwater and they could still remote view. They could say symbols, colors, all sorts, just with the same level of accuracy as they've done before. Yeah? So it's not electromagnetic in form. But again, these are scientific experiments. The CIA have been using remote viewers, what we call claircognizance, right, for years. There was a very famous one, which again the Secrets Act released this some time ago, And what it was is that there was a black ops operation. Now black means is they go out of radio silence. They fly below radar, right? And it's total stealth. And what they were doing is they were going into the Soviet Union, it was this USSR at the time, to retrieve a covert operative that had gone in there to get information. So what a black ops operation is, even the people at the headquarters do not know where they're going. They are completely and utterly autonomous. So when they take off, they choose the route, they choose how they get there, yeah, and they don't tell anybody outside of the aircraft. They keep radio silence and they fly below radar, yeah. Now, they were supposed to be back at a certain time, and they didn't come back. They disappeared. They couldn't possibly know where they were. So what they did is they got a remote viewer in to see if they could find them. Now, this remote viewer, in essence, drew the shape of a river, and drew some mountains, and drew, the sea and some kind of villages. And what they did is they then looked on the map for somewhere that resembled that drawing. And they found somewhere which resembled exactly the drawing. And they said, the plane has actually come down and it's on the U-bend of this river. They flew out to the place on the map and the plane was there. Yeah? So these are real life experiments that have happened, and it's just not common knowledge. Yeah, they don't want us to know that we have this power. So Stefan has done this experiments and he's found about 12% of the population have, with a bit of training, this ability to tap into it. Yeah, medical intuitives can do it. There's people that can say, oh, you've got cancer of the such and such. Yeah, and when they go and have a scan, yes, they have. And they couldn't possibly know it, but they just know. And, my mission is, in essence, to demonstrate this phenomenon and get the evidence out there in the form of documentaries and things like that. Because when people realize what power we have, yeah, just imagine if 3,000 Buddhists in the Maharishi effect can end war throughout the whole of India. What if, with the modern technology and internet, we can connect thousands and millions of people together and get everybody to visualize peace on earth? Then we will have peace on earth.
Yes, of course.
Thank you for sharing knowledge. Okay. Thank you for sharing knowledge.
You're most welcome.
So, how many people that was?
Sorry, it's gone quiet again. I'm not sure. No, it's still quiet, I'm afraid.
You can't hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'll go lower.
Must be very directional, that mic.
I'm saying that I'm a fellow dreamer. Yep. In order to reach what you have just said, we need to develop this skill or power that you're talking about of being our consciousness. So what do you recommend us to do as normal human beings without, are not from this 12% that you just mentioned, in order to develop being, having this more intuitive skill?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I heard you. And yeah, it's a good question. A big part of it, in essence, is tapping into that stillness. Yeah, meditative processes and things like that. So I do an actual training program on this. All right, I've been developing, and this is going to be part of the Ashta project as well. Right. So I use applied kinesiology, muscle testing. Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with muscle testing. Now, So kinesiology so we have a thing called somatic embodiment. Soma is the body, right? Now, the premise is that the mind is the dysfunctional interface, yeah? The mind is the ego, the mind is the construct. I've been conditioned to believe I should look at the world in a certain way. This is why children especially the age of 5, are more open, because they're in a state, what we call theta brainwave state. Theta brainwave state is a hypnotic state, it's a meditative state. Our rational part of the brain is not engaged when we're in theta brainwave state. Now, unfortunately, when we get above 7 years old, because 7 years old is roughly when we start coming out of theta brainwave state and we start going to alpha states and, beta and gamma and things like that, yeah? Now, as an adult, we cannot achieve theta brainwave state with our eyes open. We have to reduce the amount of information coming into our system to achieve this resonant frequency in our brain, yeah? Now, to give you an idea, Edison used a certain practice to tap into his higher knowledge, right? And you might have seen these Chinese meditation balls where you twiddle them in your hand like 3 balls and they've got bells inside, yeah? And he would sit in his favorite chair and he would close his eyes and he would, again, remember what I was saying about we must thank Allah as if we already have it. What he would do is he would focus on the feeling that he would get when he has that epiphany. Yeah? He didn't think about the problem. He didn't think about solving the solution. He asked his body to give him the experience of the feeling of that, I've got it. Yeah? That excitement, that epiphany, that, I totally get it. I have got it. I understand it. Right? And it's inducing that neurochemical response of as if you have already got the answer. Yeah? And he would dwell in that excitement and that feeling, and he would drift off to sleep. Now, as we drift off to sleep, we go into this theta brainwave state. Yeah, this ethereal connection with the divine, with the field of information. Now, we've probably all had an experience where we go to sleep and we have this great idea, right? But often we fall asleep and we wake up in the morning and our brain says, you had a great idea last night, but you can't remember it for the life of you. Yeah? It's like it teases you, right? Now, what would happen is that when he'd drift off and he'd go into this theta brainwave state, he'd drop the meditation balls, they would clang on the floor, they'd wake him up, and he would then write down this idea. And that's how he got most of his ideas for his inventions, yeah? Is by tapping into that phenomenon. Yeah? So what we need to do is get out of that kind of human state, that processing state, that kind of is becoming fully present. Another way of doing it is by looking at somebody in their eyes, right? So if you sit facing somebody and you stare at somebody eyeball to eyeball, there's an interesting phenomena that happens. Right? Our minds cannot access memory, yeah? And we go into a state of full presence. So when you're fully present, you are unable to think. You are unable to access memory, right? You have to look away to be able to do so. In fact, in psychology, we know if you look a particular way, we know what part of the brain you're accessing, yeah? Now, you can try this yourself, right? Stare at somebody's eyes and then ask them a question like, where were you last Thursday? And you'll see them, it's like they've got a mental breakdown. They're like, and then if they remember, the chances are they kind of have to break away to access memory because they're going away from presence, yep, to be able to access it and then come back to presence to give you the information, right? So to be able to tap into this phenomenon, it's about achieving full presence and achieving this theta brainwave state, right? There's all sorts of tools on the market now where we can get these sensors that we put on our head which measure our resonant frequencies. They're electroencephalographs, and we can practice certain meditations and things like that to achieve these states. Yeah. So I use muscle testing, right? So when you deflect a muscle and you say something, if it's true to your core beliefs, you will remain strong. If it causes cognitive dissonance, there's a conflict in your mind because the mind knows if you're saying something wrong. It's like a lie detector. It causes a conflict in your system, and that causes it to trigger your parasympathetic nervous system, right? So your parasympathetic nervous system, you've got two states. You've got parasympathetic, which is a calm, grounded, present state, and then you've got sympathetic, which is you are in sympathy, you are reacting, you are triggered, yeah? And when you get a cognitive dissonance, when you say something that's incongruent to your core beliefs, it triggers this sympathetic nervous system and it weakens you, yeah? So there's difference in muscle tone between something that's strong, something that's correct, and something that's weak, in other words, something that's wrong. Now, lie detectors use a different aspect of this, and this is what we call the galvanic skin response, right? So when you say a lie and your sympathetic nervous system is triggered, it is your fight or flight process. And your fight or flight process, in essence, is preparing your body for danger. It thinks you're about to die. So it then dumps neurochemistry in your body, things like adrenaline, norepinephrine, yeah? These are fight or flight neurochemicals, and they're instruction chemicals. Adrenaline instructs your muscle cells to take on 4 times the amount of glucose, which means you are much stronger, and therefore more easily to defend yourself or a quicker runner, yeah? That's how it protects you. Now, your muscles burning this extra fuel will create heat. So when we're nervous, we get hot and sweaty. And that's because our muscles are in this hyper state and we're burning more heat. And that makes us sweat. That sweating is called the galvanic skin response. Yeah? So when we trigger it, and this is why in a lie detector they put sensors on the skin. And those sensors are measuring the electrical conductivity of your skin. Because when you sweat, that salt water increases, well, it decreases the impedance, the ohmage, in other words, increases voltage. And that's what makes the needle move, yeah? And I use that by rubbing my fingers. I can measure the sensitivity of that coefficients of the skin, and when it's triggered, your fingers go sticky, and when you're in parasympathetic, it's smooth, yeah? Or if you do a muscle test, it'll be weaker is the sticky, right? And as I say, I do training on all this. And we can then tap in to our somatic knowledge. So what we can do is ask ourselves a question in the form of a statement, and that statement will either be true or it will be false. If it's true, your fingers will remain smooth or your arm will remain strong. If it's false, you will go weak or your fingers will become sticky, yeah? So this is, I call it kind of a way of externalizing intuition, yeah? Your deep inner knowing, your claircognizance. And you can use it as a tool to then fine-tune this connection with this field and ask it questions and get feedback. I've been doing an experiment with my life for the last 8 years, since 2014, when I learned this process. And I've been doing it on a daily basis, you know, even with mundane things like I'm at a new restaurant and I've got the menu in front of me and I want to know which meal I'm going to enjoy the most. And what I can do is use this phenomenon because all information contained in the field, I technically know that knowledge is there. So if I ask the field a question, my somatic embodiment will know the answer. And I'll muscle test it, and I'll score it from a 1 to 10. And if it scores a 9 or a 10, I know that meal's going to be great. So what I'll do is then order that meal, and then I can judge for myself, well, I've eaten it, is that a 9 or a 10? So if it is, then you've got feedback. you've got verification that the test was correct. Yeah? Science is all about experimentation. If you test it and then you apply the protocol and you get the result, you've got a statistical significance. If you do it 100 times and you get 90% of them correct, then you've got real statistical significance. And this is what the Astra Project's all about, applying these tools. So your phone, for example, has got accelerometers in, yeah? You know, you've probably seen these star apps where you hold your phone up and you can look around the sky, yeah? And it's to do with the gyroscope and the accelerometers, right? Now, I've got a friend in New York who's been working with colleges in the US, and if you shake your phone, it can actually muscle test you. Now, I'm also working with a scientist in Holland who's been working on a voice analytics software, and he's worked with 12,000 of his patients, tracked over 35 years. He's been doing voice samples and doing all sorts of other diagnostics. And if I get a 2-minute sample of your voice, I can tell you your Myers-Briggs profile, your Enneagram, how happy you are, how sad you are, whether you've got dyslexia, ADHD, diabetes, your muscle acidity, your organ function, all sorts of information about you, because it's a harmonic resonance in your field. It's like the acoustics of your room, yeah? Your room, if you speak, it'll sound a certain way. Now, if you have carpets down, it will sound different than if you don't have carpets down. If you've got leather furniture, it'll sound different if you've got wooden furniture, yeah? Now, if you've got sensitive enough microphones and equipment, literally you moving your foot or moving the cup that's on the table will change a certain spectrum of frequencies. And if you've got AI and machine learning that can analyze a spectrograph, you will be able to identify that. So your liver has a certain shape, and it will have a certain resonant frequency, like a piece of furniture within your body. And if it's inflamed or it's not inflamed, it will have a different resonant frequency. So that's in essence what we're tapping into. And what we can do, so one of my experiments that I'm going to be running through the Astra Project is, can we tap in to this common consciousness? If we are all connected and our bodies are connected to source, and we can ask our bodies a question and connect to this field, then can we use technology to do so? So if we had, say, 10,000 people as part of this experiment, what we would do is, with the app, it would send them a question, right? And the question might be, right, a political question. Should we, is it best for society to have this policy? Yeah? Now, if we ask people to vote with their opinion, all we're going to get is their conditioned, educated opinion. Now, depending on what background, what's your education, what's your religious beliefs, what's your philosophy, what you've been taught by your parents or school, that will usually heavily influence your opinion. Yeah, what side of the political sway you are. Now, if we muscle test it, which I have been doing, as I say, for hundreds of experiments, thousands of experiments over the last 8 years, quite often the muscle testing contradicts what you thought. Now, one of my kind of experiments that I did with the muscle testing is I had, let's say, a board of directors. Now, sometimes companies get in this place where the board of directors, one half of the board are saying, oh, we need to do this with the company. And the other half of the board of directors are saying, no, we need to do that with the company. Now, if you've got a split board, usually what happens is the CEO goes, okay, we're going to do this, which rendered the board completely and utterly obsolete. The CEO made the decision. The board were useless. They were just, an ornament, right? Now, when I've been in those situations and I've physically muscle tested everybody on the board, everybody muscle tested the same answer. So if everybody muscle tested, their bodies were congruent and agreed with each other, but their heads differed in their opinion, well, maybe their deeper inner knowing knew the truth. It's just their opinion, their ego, couldn't tap into that. So if we, through this technology, through the voice tech, and through the accelerometers and kinesiology with your phone, sent out a question to 10,000 people, If you ask their opinion, you might get 5 different answers and have a split thing. This is what voting's all about. Usually 20% of the votes is what votes in the power, because 50% don't vote because they think it's pointless, and the rest is just split decisions. Well, if, for example, the testing had a congruence of 90%, then potentially that is tapping into the field and we are getting the most elegant answer, which is the common consciousness. And we could make a decentralized governance way of making decisions, which is not based on opinion, that's not based on ego, and that's not based on a hierarchical system. But we can also use this as a way of training our intuition.
This was very valuable and very good conversations we had. Definitely, and thank you so much for everything that you told us. And yes, if you can just send me the Ashta website.
Yep.
I can post it on Instagram. And thank you so much. I mean, I don't know if anyone has any questions. I think we're also running a bit late.
Yeah, I can talk forever.
We really enjoyed your conversation and all the valuable information you have. This is definitely not the last time we're going to do this, and hopefully one time we're going to do it live. You should definitely come to Saudi and visit.
I'd love to. I do love that part of the world.
Yes. By the way, a fun fact about Adrian, I don't know if it's still true or not. You just live with your bag and you go where the wind takes you. Is that correct?
Well, for 2.5 years, I was taking one-way trips, seeing what happened. I'd get opportunities and I would use muscle testing to make the decisions. My experiment is how do I get me out of my own way and tap into higher knowledge? So all my decisions for 2.5 years, up until the Corona lockdown, I was literally I did 30 countries in 2.5 years. I didn't stay in a city more than 4, 5, 6 days. Went in multiple places, multiple times. Yeah. So it was a pretty crazy trip. I had another one, which is a Demo Baza outfit, I've been developing this character called the Subconscious Assassin. This is actually one of my NFT projects. And the Subconscious Assassin was this metaphysical being that navigated the world in the psychedelic realm and killed people's egos. He was a dark hero because he saved people from themselves.
You know something, one of our 5 pillars of Islam, we have to go to Mecca, and the outfit is very similar to yours.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes, I would love to go there one day as well. I've got a lot of Muslim friends, and some of them say, because being Muslim isn't about certain processes. It's a way of being. It's about being a good person.
It's about surrender.
It is. It's a surrender to the higher forces.
Definitely. All right, Adrian, thank you again. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Please send me your website with the link.
Yeah, I will do indeed. Thank you for the invitation, and very grateful to share.
Thank you.
All right.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.